You think people are fundamentally good, that loyalty is real, that if you just work hard and stay kind the world will eventually reward you. You think that. And that belief, that soft, comfortable, inherited belief, is the reason you keep getting blindsided. The reason people you trusted walked away with everything. The reason you're sitting here, watching this, with a quiet feeling in your chest that something is wrong but you can't name it. Here's the truth. You have been operating with a broken map of human nature. And every loss you've experienced, every betrayal, every manipulation, every moment someone used your kindness against you, was the map failing you. Not people failing you. The map. What you're about to hear is not comfortable. It is not designed to be. Machiavelli didn't write to comfort men. He wrote to arm them. 500 years ago he looked at human nature without flinching, without softening it, without the filters of religion or sentiment, and he described exactly what people do when power, fear, and self-interest are at stake. He was exiled for it. Hated for it. And he was right about all of it. By the end of this, you will not see people the same way. You will not interact the same way. You will not be manipulated the same way. Once this awareness is installed, it does not uninstall. That is the deal. If you're willing to trade comfort for clarity, stay. 7 brutal truths about human nature. The ones most people learn too late, after the damage is done, after the losses pile up, after years of confusion about why the world didn't work the way they were told it would. Let's begin. Number 1. People do not act on values. They act on incentives. You were told that people behave according to their principles, their morals, their character. You were taught to believe that a person who says the right things, holds the right beliefs, signals the right values, is a person you can trust. This is one of the most dangerous illusions ever constructed, because it makes you evaluate people based on what they say instead of what they stand to gain. Machiavelli understood this completely. He wrote that men will always be wicked unless necessity compels them to be good. Read that again. Not culture. Not upbringing. Not virtue. Necessity. What a person has to lose. What a person stands to gain. That is the engine of human behavior. Watch the person who preaches loyalty the loudest when everything is stable. Then watch them the moment their interests shift. Watch the colleague who champions fairness until there's a promotion at stake. Watch the friend who believes in honesty until the truth would cost them something. The values don't disappear. They just reveal themselves as decorations, not foundations. The average person never interrogates this. They take people at their word, assign them a character, and then feel personally betrayed when that character evaporates under pressure. But there was no betrayal. There was only misread incentive structure. You want to understand someone? Stop listening to their stated values. Start mapping their incentives. What do they need from you right now? What do they stand to lose if they stay loyal? What do they gain by switching sides? Answer those questions and you will predict their behavior with surgical precision. Write this down. Character is what people do when their incentives don't require them to do otherwise. Everything else is performance. Number 2. Everyone is protecting an image of themselves. And they will destroy you before they damage that image. Human beings are not primarily truth-seeking. They are primarily self-concept protecting. The story a person tells about who they are, competent, good, fair, strong, generous, is the most defended territory in their psychology. More defended than their money. More defended than their relationships. More defended than the truth. This is not weakness in the obvious sense. It is the invisible operating system of almost every conflict you will ever have. When you challenge someone's self-image, even accidentally, even with facts, even with good intentions, you have created an enemy. They may not say so. They may smile. But something shifts. And eventually, that shift will cost you. Machiavelli observed that men forget the death of their father more easily than they forget the loss of their patrimony. He was talking about property, but the principle extends further. Men forget external losses far more easily than they forget wounds to their sense of self. An insult lands deeper than an injury. You have made this mistake. You told someone the truth and they never forgave you. You corrected someone publicly and they spent years quietly undermining you. You were better at something than someone who believed they were the best, and they worked to erase your credibility. Not because you did something wrong. Because your existence threatened their image. This is the game. The man who understands this doesn't go around telling people uncomfortable truths unprompted. He doesn't correct people in front of others. He doesn't win arguments in ways that require the other person to admit they were foolish. He gives people the ability to save face, not out of weakness, but because he understands that a humiliated person is a permanently dangerous person. Protect their image publicly. Know the truth privately. That is power. Comment: I move in silence. Number 3. Gratitude is a debt most people are desperate to repay by forgetting it. You helped someone when they had nothing. You gave them access, opportunity, time, loyalty. You expected that investment to mean something. That when the time came, they would remember. They would reciprocate. They would be there. They weren't. And you were shocked. Because the story you were told about human nature says that generosity builds loyalty. That people honor those who help them rise. That debt creates bond. The brutal truth is the opposite. Gratitude is psychologically uncomfortable. It is a constant reminder of a person's former weakness, former need, former insufficiency. Every time they see you, they feel that reminder. And over time, the mind does what it always does to protect the self-concept. It rewrites the story. Your help becomes less significant in memory. Their own effort becomes more significant. Until eventually, in their internal narrative, they did it themselves. And you, the witness to their need, become a threat to that story. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Not because love is weak, but because love is conditional. Fear is structural. People stay loyal to what they cannot afford to lose, not to what they feel grateful for. The average person gives generously and expects loyalty in return. Then they are confused and hurt when the people they help are the first to distance themselves when those people gain power. The weak version of this lesson is bitterness. The powerful version is recalibration. Stop building relationships on the foundation of what you've done for people. Build them on mutual necessity. Not charity. Not sentiment. Mutual need. When your departure costs someone something real, they stay. When your presence is merely appreciated, they leave the moment it becomes convenient. Burn this into your mind. People do not stay out of gratitude. They stay out of necessity. Structure your relationships accordingly. Number 4. Most people are not thinking about you. They are thinking about what you think of them. You have spent years managing other people's perceptions of you. Worrying about how you came across in that conversation. Replaying that moment when you said the wrong thing. Constructing yourself carefully so that others will see you the way you want to be seen. And here is the unbearable irony. The people you're performing for are too busy performing for you to actually watch your performance. Every person in every room is running the same internal calculation. Am I being seen correctly? Am I being respected? Am I being underestimated or overestimated? Am I safe here? The self-referential loop of human consciousness means that genuine attention to another person requires deliberate effort that almost no one makes by default. This has 2 implications. First, most of the social fear you carry is monitoring a threat that barely exists. The audience you imagine is not watching the way you think they are. Second, and more dangerous, because people are so focused on their own image management, they are extraordinarily easy to influence by becoming the person who makes them feel seen. Attention, real or manufactured, is one of the rarest and most powerful social currencies. The man who makes people feel truly noticed, who reflects their self-image back at them with precision, gains access and loyalty that money cannot buy. This is not manipulation in the petty sense. It is the strategic application of psychological reality. You understand what people actually want beneath the surface, which is to be perceived as significant, and you give them that experience. The weak man tries to be impressive. The strategic man makes others feel impressive. One creates envy. The other creates devotion. Say it with me: I give people significance. I take nothing in return but access. Number 5. People will always justify what they've already decided. Logic does not lead human decisions. It follows them. This is not cynicism. This is neuroscience and 5 centuries of behavioral observation compressed into one sentence. By the time a person presents you with their reasoning, the decision has already been made on emotional and self-interested grounds. What you are witnessing is the construction of a rational facade over an emotional foundation. This means that arguing with someone's logic is almost always futile. You can demolish every point. You can present irrefutable evidence. You can be demonstrably, objectively correct, and change nothing. Because you are attacking the facade. The decision lives somewhere else. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote not about how to argue, but about how to position. How to construct situations in which people's self-interest naturally aligned with what you needed them to do. He did not try to change minds. He changed incentive landscapes. You have wasted enormous energy in your life trying to convince people of things they had already decided not to believe. Relationships where you kept presenting evidence of your worth to someone who had already decided to devalue you. Professional situations where you made rational arguments to people who had already decided the outcome. Conversations where you thought clarity of reasoning would create change in someone for whom the change would cost something. The moment you stop trying to win arguments and start trying to understand what decision has already been made and why, your effectiveness in every domain shifts completely. You are no longer fighting the facade. You are working with the actual architecture. This changes everything about how you move. You stop talking and start reading. You stop convincing and start positioning. You become invisible in your influence and undeniable in your outcomes. If this resonates, subscribe. There is more where this comes from. Number 6. Proximity to power changes people. Always. Without exception. You have watched this happen and not named it. Someone you knew, good person, humble, relatable, real, gain status, money, authority, visibility. And something shifts. Not immediately. Gradually. They become harder to reach. More guarded. Less vulnerable. Their circle contracts around those who can serve the new version of them. And the people from before, the people who knew them when, are quietly archived. You called it success going to their head. You called it ego. You called it betrayal. But it is none of those things. It is the predictable, mechanical response of the human organism to changed environmental conditions. Power changes what people need. It changes what threatens them. It changes who is useful and who is now a liability. The person who knew them in their weakness is a risk to the image they are now constructing. The person from before carries evidence of vulnerability. And in high-stakes environments, vulnerability is danger. This is not malice. Machiavelli understood that princes must constantly evaluate who around them reinforces their position and who, by their mere presence, undermines it. This is not cruelty. It is survival logic operating at the level of social architecture. The lesson is not to avoid people with ambition. The lesson is to never position yourself in someone's life as a reminder of their lesser self. If you want to remain relevant as someone rises, you must rise alongside them or become indispensable to their future rather than a witness to their past. Sentiment does not survive in high-altitude environments. The average person thinks loyalty is honored. The strategic person knows that loyalty is only as durable as its current utility. Position accordingly. Number 7. Fear is a more reliable foundation for influence than love. But the highest form of power requires neither. This is the most misunderstood truth Machiavelli ever articulated. When he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, the weak mind hears an instruction to be cruel. To be cold. To dominate through terror. That is not what he meant and not what power looks like at its highest expression. Love is unreliable because it is conditional on continued satisfaction. Affection evaporates when circumstances change, when better options appear, when the emotional climate shifts. You cannot build durable influence on a foundation that dissolves under pressure. This is the fatal error of the man who spends his life trying to be liked. He builds in sand. Fear, in Machiavelli's framework, means consequence. It means that your departure, your disapproval, your withdrawal costs something real. That is durable. People do not abandon structures they cannot afford to lose, regardless of how they feel about those structures emotionally. But there is a third position that Machiavelli gestured at and few have fully articulated. The position of the man who is neither liked nor feared because he simply does not require either response. The man who has extracted himself from the validation economy entirely. Who moves without needing approval. Who creates without needing applause. Whose sense of self is not contingent on how he is perceived. That man is untouchable. Not because he is feared. Not because he is loved. But because he has removed himself from the game that everyone else is playing. He cannot be leveraged through social approval because he does not need it. He cannot be controlled through rejection because rejection does not diminish him. He is operating from a completely different system. This is the destination. Not the aggressive, reactive dominance of the man who needs to prove something. The settled, unperformative presence of the man who has nothing to prove and nothing to protect. Write this down. The goal is not to be feared. The goal is to need nothing from the response of others. That is sovereignty. Now listen carefully. Everything you just absorbed represents a map. But maps are only useful if you're willing to acknowledge where you actually are. Most people who encounter this information will nod. Will feel the recognition of every point. Will have faces flash in their mind, the person who used them, the person who left, the person who rewrote history to protect their self-image. They will feel the clarity like a window being cleaned. And then they will return to the same patterns. Because recognizing truth intellectually and integrating it structurally are two completely different operations. One happens in the mind. The other happens in behavior, in choices, in how you position yourself before the conversation begins, in what you agree to and what you quietly decline, in how much of yourself you make available and to whom. The version of you that kept getting blindsided, that believed in loyalty as a universal currency, that presented logic to people who had already decided, that gave generously and expected reciprocity, that tried to be liked rather than indispensable, that version of you operated on an inherited map built by people who either didn't understand power or wanted you not to understand it. That version of you must die. Not metaphorically. Not gradually. Executed. The beliefs that made you predictable, executed. The habits that made you easy to manipulate, executed. The need for people to see you correctly, to appreciate what you've done, to acknowledge your worth, executed. You stop waiting for recognition you don't need. You stop building relationships on the hope of gratitude. You stop arguing with people who have already decided. You stop performing for audiences who are performing back at you. You stop orienting your behavior around the approval of people who would abandon you the moment their incentives shifted. The old model of relating to people, the one built on sentiment, on fairness, on the hope that goodness will be rewarded, is obsolete. Not because goodness is wrong, but because navigating the world without understanding its actual mechanics is not virtue. It is negligence. It is leaving yourself exposed to every predatory dynamic while telling yourself you're taking the moral high road. The man who understands human nature and still chooses decency is powerful. The man who is decent because he doesn't understand human nature is just a target with good intentions. This is the difference. You now operate from understanding, from structure, from strategic awareness that was built over 5 centuries of observation, tested in courts and wars and negotiations and every human contest where power was at stake. You read incentives. You protect image architecture, yours and strategically others. You build on necessity, not sentiment. You stop performing and start observing. You stop arguing and start positioning. You rise in a way that doesn't archive your past, it transcends it. And you move toward the sovereignty of the man who needs no particular response from the world to remain fully himself. This is not a mindset. It is a complete architectural shift in how you process reality. The previous version of you, confused, exploited, blindsided, hopeful in the ways that made you vulnerable. That version is not coming back. There is no version of this where you unhear what you just heard. You move differently now. Comment: the old version is gone.